I get sent a lot of things. Unmarked packages, cryptic emails, links to broken websites. Usually, I ignore them, but this was different. 3 weeks ago, I found a rusted-out Ford F-150 abandoned at the base of Blackwood Ridge. No driver, no keys, just a camera bag on the passenger seat. Inside was an SD card. The last footage recorded by a filmmaker named Elias. Elias wasn't a paranormal investigator. He was a nature documentarian. He went into Blackwood Ridge on June 2nd, 2026, to film the regrowth of the old logging trails. He didn't know that the ridge hasn't been truly abandoned for a long time. The first 10 minutes of his footage are unremarkable. Just trees, just silence. But if you listen closely, you can hear it. Beneath his breathing, beneath the wind, the sound of something heavy, waiting. Elias starts his journey at the trailhead just after dawn. The morning mist is thick, clinging to the rotting pine needles that blanket the path. He talks about the isolation, about how the nearest paved road is 20 miles back, and how the self-service died the moment his tires hit the gravel. He seems happy, almost serene. He sets up his tripod, checks his focus, and begins a hike into the dense canopy. Everything seems normal. The birds are singing. The forest is vibrant. But as he treks deeper, the atmosphere shifts. The light seems to struggle to penetrate the leaves, even though it's only mid-morning. He stops to film a cluster of rusted, forgotten tools discarded near a clearing. He makes a joke about the incompetence of the crew that left them behind. He doesn't notice that the tools are covered in fresh, wet oil, not rust, despite them being exposed to the elements for decades. He walks for another hour. The path he is following begins to grow narrow. He notes that the trail maps he downloaded back in town don't match the reality of the terrain. He stops again, panning the camera to the left, then to the right. There's no sound of wind now, just a heavy, unnatural stillness. Then it happens, a dull, rhythmic thud. It sounds like a heavy piece of steel dropped into mud. Elias freezes. He turns the camera toward the sound, but there is nothing there, only thick, tangled brush. He laughs it off, nervous now, and continues forward. As he reaches the perimeter of the main logging camp, he finds a gate. It is twisted, ripped from its hinges, as if something massive had simply pushed through it with overwhelming force. He pauses, looking at the bent metal. He says that he should probably turn back, that the gut feeling in his chest is telling him to leave. But he doesn't. He pushes through the gate, and the screen fades to black for a moment, signaling the end of the first file. Elias steps into the heart of the logging camp. The silence here is even more oppressive than in the woods. The main office building stands at the center, its wooden siding gray and peeling, but the door is firmly locked. He manages to pry it open with a small tool, and the camera follows him inside, the lens struggling to focus in the dim, dusty light. Inside, the scene is jarring. The room looks as if the workers had stepped out for lunch and simply never returned. A calendar on the wall is turned to June 2026, this month. A coffee cup sits on the desk, the liquid inside long evaporated but leaving a dark, oily ring behind. Elias begins to read through a shift log he finds on the desk. His voice is barely a whisper now, trembling as he reads the entries aloud. The logs describe a project that started normal but quickly turned into a nightmare. They mention the grinding, a sound that started deep underground beneath the foundations of the camp. One entry notes that the heavy machinery began operating on its own at night, moving in circles until ground turned to slurry. Another entry, dated only 2 days prior, simply says, "The trees are moving closer. We cannot see the road anymore." Elias brushes it off as a prank, a dark joke left behind by some other traveler, but his hand is shaking so hard the camera feed ripples. He decides to head to the equipment shed at the back of the lot. As he walks, he films the forest line. He stops, zooms in, and stays there for a long, uncomfortable minute. The trees are not just standing there. They seem to be leaned inward, toward the camp, like spectators watching a play. Inside the equipment shed, the air is thick with the smell of scorched metal and something metallic, like blood. He finds a massive diesel-powered wood chipper sitting in the center of the floor. It's a relic of the 90s, rusted and ancient, but as he approaches it, he notices the gears are turning. Slowly, painfully, a rhythmic, metallic grinding noise fills the shed, vibrating the camera. He realizes then that there is no electricity in the camp. There is no fuel. There is no reason for these machines to be running. He starts to back away, but the heavy steel door of the shed slams shut behind him, cutting off the natural light. He hits the record button on his light, and the beam cuts through the darkness. The shed isn't empty. In the corner, piled high like cordwood, are hundreds of cameras. All of them are vintage models. All of them are smashed, and all of them are pointing toward the center of the shed. He realizes he is not the first person to come here. He is just the latest. Elias breaks for the door, frantic now, clawing at the rusted lock. He isn't acting like a filmmaker anymore. He is acting like prey. He screams at someone or something to open the door, but the only answer is the accelerating, deafening roar of the wood chipper behind him. The footage ends abruptly as he dives through a window, the glass shattering in a shower of shards. Elias is back in the woods, running blindly. The camera is bouncing, capturing only flashes of moss and tearing branches. He isn't trying to film a documentary anymore. He is trying to survive. He stops behind a massive, hollowed-out cedar tree to catch his breath. He whispers into the mic that he has been walking for hours. But every path he takes leads him back to the camp. He points the camera toward the sky. The sun hasn't moved. It's stuck in the same position it was when he arrived, a permanent, sickly late-afternoon glow that casts long, unnatural shadows. He realizes the woods are not just a location. They are a trap. He notices that the trees are actually closer together than they were an hour ago. He starts to panic, realization dawning on him that the forest is physically shrinking the space between the camp and the outside world. He records himself marking a tree with his knife, only to find the same mark on a tree 100 yards away seconds later. Deep in the brush, he spots it, the source, a massive piece of industrial machinery from the 50s, a steam-powered processor, is half submerged in the earth. It is glowing with a faint internal heat, and it is pulling the forest into it. The trees aren't just dying. They are being dismantled, their branches and leaves being pulled into the cold, mechanical teeth of the machine. He realizes that the camp, the forest, and the road are all being recycled, ground down into the very dirt he is standing on. He screams for help, but there is no echo. The machine stops grinding. Everything goes dead silent. A shadow, far larger than any human, detaches itself from the machine and begins to move toward him, moving through the trees like smoke through a screen. The final file is frantic. The video is corrupted, flickering with static and strange, high-pitched feedback. Elias is no longer talking. He is only sobbing, his breaths coming in ragged, desperate gasps. The camera is knocked from his hand, hitting the ground and spinning, capturing a terrifying angle of his boots sprinting to the mud as the ground itself begins to liquefy beneath him. He trips, falls, and scrambles back up, the camera lens smeared with blood and dirt. He hits a break in the trees and sees the road. It's right there, the gravel path he parked on. But the road isn't solid. It's rippling like water. He doesn't hesitate. He throws himself toward the edge of the woods, his fingers clawing at the gravel. The sound behind him is deafening now, a mix of tearing wood, grinding metal, and a sound like a human voice played in reverse. He pulls himself onto the road, the ground beneath him suddenly turning solid and hard. He doesn't look back. He just keeps running. The camera, still recording, sits on the edge of the road, pointed back toward the woods. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happens. Then, the forest edge of the frame begins to blur, the trees folding in on themselves like paper. The final shot is just the empty road and a single, rusted piece of machine gear sitting in the center of the gravel. The audio cuts to complete silence, save for a soft, rhythmic clicking, the sound of a camera timer, before the screen fades to black for the final time. Marcus Hale had always been a skeptic, a software engineer from Seattle. He dealt in code and logic, not ghosts or old family legends. When a letter arrived informing him that his great-uncle Elias had died and left him the family estate, Blackthorn Manor, a crumbling Victorian pile deep in the misty forests of Oregon, he almost laughed. He was drowning in debt. His girlfriend had left him 6 months earlier, and the city felt like it was slowly crushing him. A free house in the woods sounded like the reset button he desperately needed. The drive up the winding mountain road took nearly 5 hours. Rain hammered the windshield the entire way. By the time the iron gates of Blackthorn Manor appeared through the fog, night had fallen. The mansion loomed like a rotten tooth against the black sky. 3 stories of dark stone, ivy-choked windows, and a sagging widow's walk that looked ready to collapse. The real estate lawyer who met him there handed over the keys with a nervous smile. "Place has been empty a long time," the man said. "Your uncle lived here alone until the end. Locals say, well, never mind, just superstition." Marcus shrugged it off. He spent the first evening hauling his few boxes inside, lighting the ancient fireplaces and exploring. The interior was surprisingly preserved. Dark wood paneling, heavy velvet drapes, oil portraits of stern-faced ancestors staring down from every wall. In the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, he found an old 4-poster bed and a massive oak desk covered in yellowed papers. He fell asleep to the sound of rain on the roof, exhausted but hopeful. That night, he woke to whispering. It was faint, like voices just beyond the wall. Marcus sat up, heart thudding. The room was pitch black. He listened, straining. Nothing, just the wind, he told himself. Old houses creak and sigh. He went back to sleep. The next morning, he found the first oddity. The portrait of his great-great-grandmother in the hallway had been turned to face the wall. He didn't remember touching it. Shrugging, he turned it back and continued unpacking. The whispers returned the second night. This time they were clearer, soft, urgent voices overlapping, saying words he couldn't quite catch. They seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. Marcus grabbed a flashlight and walked corridors. The sound followed him, always just around the corner, always receding when he approached. In the library on the ground floor, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books, he found an old journal tucked behind a loose panel in the desk. The handwriting belonged to Elias. The first entry was dated 30 years earlier. They speak when the house is quiet. They remember every sin. Do not listen too long. Marcus laughed nervously. His uncle had clearly gone senile, but he kept reading. Page after page detailed Elias's growing paranoia. Servants who vanished. Family members who went into the walls. A great-aunt who clawed her own face off one winter night in 1897. And always the whispers, growing stronger the longer one stayed. Marcus closed the journal. Outside, the rain had stopped. The house was deathly silent. By the end of the first week, Marcus had stopped sleeping at night. The house, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a living, breathing lung. He stopped trying to maintain his routine. Instead, he spent his days obsessively mapping the manor, convinced there was a pattern to the madness. He found that the house didn't just creak, it shifted. Doors that led to the same room, no matter which way you entered. Hallways that seemed to lengthen as you walked down them, stretching into infinite, dark corridors that smelled of wet earth and copper. One afternoon, while passing the library window, Marcus froze. He looked out at the lawn and saw himself, or a man identical to himself, standing in the rain, staring up at the house with dead, hollow eyes. When he blinked, The figure was gone, leaving only the swaying, mist-covered trees. The whispers, once just a background had become a conversation. They were no longer incoherent. They were layered, a chorus of voices he recognized: his mother, who had been dead for 12 years, his childhood dog, whimpering in the dark, and something deeper, wet, and patient that sounded like it was speaking through layers of soil. "You belong here, Marcus." They breathed from the vents, from the floorboards, from the very air he inhaled. Like the others, he tried to leave. He grabbed his keys, sprinted for the front door, and tore down the long driveway. But the iron gates, which he had easily pushed open days before, were now fused shut, rusted in a way that defied time. The engine of his truck wouldn't turn over. The phone signal, which had been weak, vanished completely, replaced by a high-pitched electronic shriek. He hiked through the woods for hours, desperate to find the main road, only to find himself stepping out from behind the manor's own garden shed every time he tried to clear the tree line. The forest was looping. The house was the center. He returned to the basement, fueled by a frantic, jagged energy. Behind a false wall he had missed before, he found a narrow staircase leading down, not to a foundation, but into an old root cellar that had been expanded into a series of connected chambers. The air was cold, heavy with the smell of decay. On the walls were carved names, dozens of them, some dating back to the 1800s. He traced the indentations with his fingers. His own name was not there. Yet, in the center of the largest chamber, he found a mirror. It was ancient, silver-backed, with an ornate frame that seemed to twist like climbing vines. When he looked into it, his reflection didn't mimic his movements. It stood perfectly still, watching him with a wide, predatory grin that Marcus didn't feel on his own face. That night, the house truly began to wake. The walls breathed, slow, rhythmic expansions and contractions. The wallpaper was warm to the touch, soft like skin. If he pressed his ear against it, he could hear his own heartbeat echoed back, but slower, deeper, as if the manor was syncing its rhythm to his own, slowly slowing him down, making him part of the architecture. The change began in the architecture itself. It wasn't that the house was old or rotting. It was that it felt healthy in a way that defied nature. The air inside the manor took on a heavy, humid quality, smelling of damp earth and something iron-rich, like blood cooling on stone. Marcus started to notice the walls. It happened when he was in the library, trying to quiet the constant, layered murmurs of his ancestors. He leaned against the mahogany paneling, and for a split second he felt it give a slight, soft recoil, as if the wood were muscle, not timber. He pulled away, his breath hitching, and watched. There, beneath the intricate carvings of the wainscoting, a vein-like pattern began to pulse. It was faint at first, a rhythmic twitch beneath the surface of the varnish. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't the house settling. It was a heartbeat. He began to track the phenomenon. He moved from room to room, his flashlight beam trembling. In the master bedroom, the wallpaper, a faded Victorian floral pattern, seemed to be shifting. The petals weren't just designs. They were opening and closing, thousands of tiny, paper-thin mouths gasping for air. The manor was no longer a structure. It was a digestive tract, and he was being drawn deeper into the gut. He found the source of the squelching sound he had been hearing in the halls. It wasn't water in the pipes. It was the house repairing itself. Where he had once seen a cracked floorboard, there was now a thick, translucent film that looked like scar tissue, sealing the wood tight. He touched it, and his finger came away covered in a clear, viscous fluid that smelled like ozone and musk. He didn't run. He couldn't. His own body was beginning to mimic the house. His pulse had slowed to match the rhythmic drumming in the walls. When he breathed, he felt his own lungs expanding and contracting in perfect, horrifying synchronization with the manor's own respiration. He stopped using his phone to record the audio. He didn't need it anymore. He could hear them now. The voices weren't coming from the air. They were coming from his own nerves. The walls were whispering through his bones. "We are the foundation," they hummed, a sound that resonated in his very marrow. "And you are the mortar." He walked to the basement door, not because he was scared, but because he was called. The house needed him to reach the cellar, to reach the mirror, to complete the cycle. The wood beneath his feet felt warm, almost soft, like the floor of a throat, swallowing his footsteps as he descended into the dark. 2 weeks in, the fear had burned out. It had simply evaporated, leaving something colder and far more patient in its wake. Marcus stopped being afraid of the shadows. He stopped sleeping in the master bedroom, the door wide open, as if he were waiting for a guest. The whispers were no longer an intrusion. They were a comfort. They were like old friends recounting family history, sharing the burden of centuries. They told him how his ancestors had made the pact in the 1870s. The house would grant wealth and long life, but it required a constant infusion of vitality. The manor was a machine, and the family bloodline was a fuel. Every generation, one child was chosen to stay behind to maintain the structure. The others were allowed to leave, to wander, to spread the seed, ensuring the manor always had fresh, unsuspecting souls to lure back. Marcus was the last, the final harvest. One night, he woke to find the walls breathing, slow, rhythmic expansions and contractions. He pressed his ear against the wallpaper and heard his own heartbeat echoed back, but slower, deeper, as if the house had claimed his pulse as its own. He felt a strange, chilling contentment. He belonged here. He had always belonged here. He tried one final escape at dawn, more out of habit than desire. He smashed a third-floor window and climbed out onto the ivy. Halfway down, the vines, thick, pulsating, and vein-like, wrapped around his ankles like fingers. They didn't struggle. They simply pulled him back inside through a different window on the second floor. As he landed on the dusty floorboards, he didn't scream. He just sat there, listening to the chorus of 100 voices welcoming him home. "You were always ours, Marcus," they whispered in unison. He crawled to the basement, his movements fluid and dreamlike. He stood before the ancient mirror. This time, his reflection didn't wait for him. It reached out, its fingers cold and wet, and grabbed him by the throat. Marcus felt his body being pulled into the glass. It didn't feel like pain. It felt like returning to a familiar room. The surface rippled like water, and as his face sank into the silver, he saw the truth. There were countless versions of himself trapped inside, pressed flat between the layers of silver and glass, mouths open in a silent, eternal scream. The walls weren't just architecture. They were membranes. The entire house was a stomach, slowly digesting generations of his family, one mind at a time. The last thing Marcus felt before his consciousness stretched thin and merged with the manor was a sudden, absolute clarity. He was no longer Marcus Hale. He was the hallway. He was the floorboards. He was a whisper in the dark.